The Thunder Bay Police Service has faced serious allegations of misconduct, shoddy work, and racism for several years now. It culminated recently with a damning new report and calls to simply dismantle the force. Charnel Anderson covers the Northwestern Ontario Hubs, and she joins us now from Thunder Bay for a more detailed look. Hello, Charnel.
Hi, Jan.
All right, I want to read a short little quote from you, and I'm hoping that you can put some context to it. This was from the former Thunder Bay Police Service Board Chair, and she wrote, "The Thunder Bay Police Service is on the brink of collapse." What do they mean by that?
It's a powerful statement, isn't it? I think that Georgianne Morrisseau used those words to really get people's attention drawn to the issues facing the Thunder Bay Police Service and its board. So Morrisseau wrote that in a statement that was published on social media earlier this year, where she also accuses current leadership of not being serious about change. And Morrisseau expanded on issues that she said she's seen during her time as chair of the board and then later as a member. And these are issues that she says are in the public interest, including that instead of allocating funds appropriately, leadership of the Thunder Bay Police Service has spent an exorbitant amount on funding improper investigations, though she doesn't say what those investigations are specifically. And her letter also mentions shockingly low morale among members of the service. She mentions a series of human rights complaints, including her own, that have been filed against the Thunder Bay Police Service, its legal counsel, and the board. And there's information to support much of what she's saying, particularly about the human rights complaints. I believe to date there's been a dozen or more human rights complaints filed against the Thunder Bay Police Service. And in terms of low morale among officers, a 2021 survey from the Thunder Bay Police Association, which represents sworn officers and civilian employees, found that 76% of respondents describe employee morale as negative or very negative. And so, I think that either one of these issues is a huge problem, but these issues combined with other issues facing the Thunder Bay Police Service and its board, I think that's why Morrisseau said that she feels the Thunder Bay Police Service is on the brink of collapse.
Yeah, just as you mentioned, you say issues plural, and of course these date back to pretty much 2015. And so for TVO.org, you wrote an article detailing sort of the events there. And it all seemed to have started with the death of Stacy Debunky. Can you sort of tell us what happened in that particular case and how that sort of turned into what we're at right now?
Yeah, I will say that a lot of these issues date back even further, but I decided to start with Stacy Debunky's death because his death and the initial police investigation into his death really was a pivotal moment for the Thunder Bay Police Service. And, it continues to cast a shadow over the police service to this day. So Stacy, you may remember, was an Indigenous man from Rainy River First Nation who was found dead in the McIntyre River the morning of October 19th, 2015. Only 3 hours after his body was found and before he was identified, let alone having the time to conduct a postmortem, the Thunder Bay Police Service issued a press release that said their initial investigation does not indicate a suspicious death. And then the next day, the police issued another press release that said his death was non-criminal. But, because of how quickly the police determined Stacy's death to be non-criminal, it raised questions about the police investigation, and it raised concerns from Stacy's family, the community, Rainy River First Nation. And those concerns led to a complaint with the province's police watchdog, the Office of the Independent Police Review Director, which ultimately launched a systemic review of the Thunder Bay Police Service.
Let's talk about that review. Of course, it was Stacy's family and the then chief of Rainy River First Nation that brought that complaint forward to the Ontario Independent Police Review Directorate. Tell me about that systemic review of the Thunder Bay Police report. There was, of course, recommendations, but there was a lot of years and a lot of steps before that as well.
Yeah, so about a year after Stacy's death in 2016, then OIPRD Director Jerry McNeely launched this review. And the terms of reference for his investigation were, among other things, to examine the policies, practices, and attitudes of the Thunder Bay Police Service, specifically related to Indigenous missing persons and death investigations. And he also wanted to look at whether these investigations were done in discriminatory ways. And at the same time, the OIPRD started looking into the issues around the investigation of Stacy Debunky's death. And what they found in that case was that the police failed to act on investigative leads. They failed to follow up with witnesses. And the OIPRD went so far as to say that the deficiencies in the investigation were so substantial and deviated so significantly from what was required that there were reasonable and probable grounds to support an allegation of neglect of duty. And as a result of this report, the officers involved in the investigation of Stacey Debunky's death are facing neglect of duty charges under the Police Services Act. In terms of the systemic review, though, that concluded in December 2018 and resulted in the Broken Trust Report, which you may remember is quite a damning report. And it found that there was something of a pattern in the way that the Thundery Police Service conducted sudden death and homicide investigations, because many of the investigations that the OIPRD looked at, which they looked at random, had serious deficiencies. And so all this work, these investigations resulted in 44 recommendations, many involving the Thunder Bay Police, including a recommendation to reinvestigate 9 sudden deaths and other recommendations that are kind of intended to restore trust between police and the Indigenous community in Thunder Bay.
You mentioned the 44 recommendations. You also mentioned report after report after report. And I think at the end of the day, people want to see what progress is being made. Do we have any progress on those 44 recommendations?
Yeah, so I mean, the bulk of the recommendations were for the Thunder Bay Police Service, and some of the recommendations, like reinvestigating 9 sudden deaths, were a lot more involved than other recommendations, like including name tags on uniforms or implementing body-worn and in-car cameras. But they have been at this for a few years now. And earlier this year, the Thunder Bay Police Service said that they were on track to complete 80% of the OIPRD's 44 recommendations. So they said that 20 of these recommendations were complete, while 4 were not applicable to them. And then the remaining 12 recommendations, which include things like implementing Indigenous cultural competency training, information sharing, and improvements to file management, among other things, are ongoing.
In our last minute together, I want to talk about sort of the latest developments. Of course, we talk about, the police service being on the brink of collapse, calls for dismantling the force entirely and having the OPP in there. Can you tell us about sort of those calls and some of the other latest developments?
Yeah, sure. So the report on the 9 reinvestigations that was recently leaked to media, and that found shortcomings in the original investigations. And that same report also recommends reinvestigations or a coroner's review of 16 more sudden deaths. There was a second report that recommends a review of 25 unsolved cases of missing murdered Indigenous women and girls. And, besides those reinvestigations, there appear to be a number of internal issues facing the Thunder Bay Police Service, including the complaints filed with the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal, the fact that the deputy chief was suspended in late January. There's an OCPC investigation that's been launched and an OPP investigation that's been launched. So I think we're really eager to kind of see where these investigations go.
Charnel Anderson, thank you so much for joining us on the program tonight. Of course, a story that you will keep your eye on and keep us updated on. Thank you again.
Thanks.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.